The house was silent. The kind of silence that wraps itself around you not gently, but like a heavy wool blanket in summer. It was 5:30 a.m. The sun hadn't yet touched the windows, but Iris had already been up for nearly an hour. She didn't need a clock. Her body was a clock set long ago by the demands of motherhood, by school lunches, work shifts, early gardenings, and late-night worries. She padded across the kitchen in soft slippers, her steps so familiar they no longer made sound. The ceramic mugs waited in the cupboard, same place they'd always been, one with a faded floral rim, one plain white, Robert's favorite. She still took out both. She didn't know why anymore. The kettle let out its low whistle. She poured the water, 2 scoops of coffee, splash of oat milk. No sugar, never sugar. Robert liked it bitter, so she kept drinking it that way, even now. Outside, the sky was still the color of charcoal. A few birds stirred in the trees, restless but not yet singing. Everything was still, almost too still. She sat by the window, wrapped her hands around the mug, and stared into the gray morning. The garden beyond the glass still bore the shape of Robert's hands, raised beds, stone-lined paths, a small bench under the oak tree he planted the year Naomi was born. Robert had loved mornings. He used to say dawn was the only time the world didn't ask anything of you. Iris exhaled slowly. 40 years of mornings, of waking before everyone else, of preparing, serving, folding, fixing, cleaning, holding. But now, no one woke after her. No one needed breakfast made or shoes tied. Her children were grown, her grandchildren too young to care where the toast came from. And Robert was just a name stitched into old photographs. She reached for the second mug and held it for a moment, then set it down untouched. This was what no one told you about getting older, that your days didn't shrink, they stretched. Longer, quieter, heavier. From the outside, her life probably looked peaceful, but to Iris, it felt like being erased one soft morning at a time. And she would have gone on like that, smiling, pouring coffee, holding her breath for no one, until one child's whisper changed everything. But that part comes later. Iris didn't hear the footsteps. She never did with Naomi. That child moved like a ghost, small, soft, and always barefoot, even when the floor was cold. When Iris turned, Naomi was already there, perched on the edge of the kitchen stool, legs swinging back and forth, her dinosaur pajamas bunching at the knees. Her voice was quiet, so quiet Iris nearly missed it. "Grandma, Mommy and Daddy said they're taking your money tonight." Just like that, the air changed, thickened, heavy with something unspoken. Iris froze spoon mid-stir, as if her whole body had turned to glass. She smiled, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile adults wear when the world suddenly feels wrong and they don't want to scare the child in the room. "That's a silly thing to say, sweetheart," Iris said gently. "What do you mean?" Naomi shrugged like it wasn't a big deal, like it was just another bedtime story. "I don't know," she said, grabbing a cracker from the jar. "I was supposed to be asleep." "But I heard them. They were talking downstairs." Iris crouched beside her, tucked a curl behind her ear. "You didn't dream this?" "Nope." Naomi's reply was firm. "I was hiding under my blanket, but I could hear." And just like that, she went back to munching her cracker. No fear, no doubt. Because to a child, truth is simple. If you heard it, it happened. Iris stood up slowly. Her hands were trembling, but not from age. It was the awakening of an instinct long buried. The part of her that once knew when a child had a fever before the thermometer said so. The part of her that used to notice when a lie hung too long in the air. Naomi didn't know she'd just cracked something wide open. She didn't know her whisper was the first warning bell in a war Iris didn't know she was already in. But Iris knew, and for the first time in years, she stopped stirring the coffee. The front door clicked shut. Not slammed, not loud, just careful. Too careful. Iris knew that sound. It was the sound Celeste made when she was running late but didn't want to admit it. Heels tapped down the hallway. a designer bag flung carelessly onto the dining chair, and then her daughter swept into the kitchen like she owned it. She didn't say good morning. She didn't ask about Naomi. She didn't even glance at Iris. She opened the fridge with one hand, scrolled her phone with the other. She moved like Iris was furniture. Iris, already anticipating it, held out a travel mug of coffee, Celeste's usual, with almond milk and cinnamon. Celeste took it without looking up. "Can you pick up Naomi from school today?" she said. "Vincent has a dinner with clients, and I'm showing 2 properties." Iris nodded, the same nod she'd given for years. No complaint, no question, just yes. "You're the best," Celeste added absently. She gave a quick smile, tight, distracted, and turned back to texting. And then she was gone, just like that. As if Iris were the maid, the nanny, the background. She hadn't even finished her coffee. It sat on the counter still warm. But the bitterness in her throat had nothing to do with the roast. Iris stood there for a long moment. She used to be the center of Celeste's universe. Now she was the unpaid assistant in a house she'd paid for. "No, thank you." "No, how are you?" Just a list of errands swallowed in entitlement. She picked up her own mug, took a sip, and winced. Not because the coffee was bad, because it tasted like habit, like submission. And for the first time, it didn't sit right. She didn't mean to stop. She was carrying a bundle of fresh towels heading upstairs like she always did, quiet, steady, invisible. But halfway down the hallway, Iris heard it. The voice, Vincent's voice. Low, clipped, calculated. "She's not getting any younger. If we don't step in now, she might waste everything." Iris paused just inches from the guest room door, which hung slightly ajar. She didn't breathe, didn't blink. Celeste's voice followed softer, but sharper. "We're not stealing from her. We're protecting her. She doesn't need that much money sitting around. It's not safe." A pause, long enough to be dangerous. Then Vincent spoke again, calm, like he was talking about a business deal. "She won't even notice. Just keep it framed as support. Once she signs over access, it'll make everything easier." Iris clutched the towels to her chest, fingers tightening with every word. This wasn't a conversation. This was a strategy, a plan to remove her from her own life, gently, legally, permanently. She backed away slowly, footsteps feather light, down the hallway, into the kitchen, where she folded the towels and placed them neatly on a chair, with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Then she wiped down the stove, though it was already clean. She needed to move, because if she stopped, if she let herself feel too much, she might shatter. But inside her, something old had woken up. They weren't planning to help her. They were planning around her. The first time she said yes, it felt like love. Celeste had just started her real estate business. She called Iris in tears, voice cracking over the phone. "Mom, we're short for the down payment. I hate asking, but we don't have another option." Iris didn't hesitate. She wrote a check the same day. No questions, no conditions. Because Robert would have done the same. Because that's what family meant. Because mothers don't keep score. Then Vincent needed help. Credit cards piling up. Just a tight month, he had said. Iris sold the old cabin by the lake to cover it. It had been Robert's favorite place. But family came first. Then Deidre lost her job. Iris let her move into the garage apartment just for a few weeks, she promised. That was 6 years ago. Then Naomi's preschool. Then her music classes. Then groceries, electricity, school fees. And every time Iris said yes. She said yes like a reflex, because that's what love looked like to her, giving without keeping track. But something changed along the way. The thank yous faded. The calls for help became silent expectations. Her support turned into invisible labor, unnoticed but always required. At some point, she stopped being the mother and started being the emergency fund they didn't bother to refill. They didn't ask anymore. They assumed. They assumed she'd always have the money. They assumed she'd be fine without that cabin. They assumed she'd be home always, just in case someone needed to drop off a kid, a dry cleaning, or a bill. And worst of all, they assumed she'd say yes, every time. But today, for the first time in decades, Iris wasn't so sure. Iris sat alone in the kitchen, her palms flat against the counter, her coffee long gone cold. She didn't move. She didn't need to. The weight wasn't on her shoulders. It was in her chest, coiled tight, slow burning, like a fuse waiting for a spark. She stared at nothing, but her thoughts were loud. Was I wrong to love without limits? To give and never ask for anything in return? She had spent decades making sure everyone had what they needed. She called it love. They called it normal. She thought her silence was strength, but maybe they took it as surrender. They didn't thank her anymore. They didn't ask. They expected. And that's what stung the most. When did my kindness become a job description? When did I stop being a mother and become an obligation? Iris blinked, and something inside her shifted, quietly but permanently. Not anger, not revenge, just a line drawn in the sand, a whisper inside her that said, enough. Because betrayal doesn't always wear a stranger's face. Sometimes it looks like your own daughter, smiling while planning your erasure. She didn't know why she dialed Margot. She just did. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was because Margot had never lied to her, not even when the truth hurt like hell. The phone rang once, then a click. No greeting, no hello. Just Margot's voice, sharp and steady. What's wrong? That was Margot, straight to the bone. Iris swallowed hard. She hadn't cried yet, but her voice trembled anyway. She told Margot everything. Naomi's whisper, the conversation behind the door. The way Celeste walked past her that morning like she was staff instead of family. When she finished, there was a silence. Not cold, not dismissive, just heavy. Then Margot spoke. They're not protecting you, Iris. They're surrounding you. Iris closed her eyes. The words landed too easily, because deep down, she'd already known. I don't think they've done anything yet, she said quietly. Margot didn't hesitate. Yet. They will. And they'll tell themselves they're doing it out of love. Iris stared across the room at Robert's writing desk, where their old will still sat untouched since the funeral. Check everything, Margot said. Your bank accounts, your will, any documents you ever let them near. Her voice was calm, but there was fire beneath it. You're not being paranoid, Iris. You're waking up. And just like that, Iris stood up, not just from the chair, but from the role she'd been playing for far too long. She wasn't just going to sit and wait. She was going to check everything. Margot didn't say fight. She didn't say confront. She said be smart, quiet smart. And Iris was. The moment the call ended, she walked straight to Robert's old desk. The drawer creaked like it too had been asleep for years. Inside was their original will, still folded neatly, signed, witnessed, never touched since the funeral. She pulled it out and stared at her name. Iris Adeline Moore. Still there, still hers. But for how long? She didn't wait. She started checking everything. Every account, every password, every shared login she'd ever given Celeste or Vincent, just in case they needed to check a balance, pay a bill, help out. She reset all of it. Banking apps, savings accounts, the old safe deposit box she hadn't opened in years. She even called the cable company because control hides in the smallest things, like who pays the bill and whose name is still on it. Then she did the hardest thing of all. She called a lawyer. Not the family lawyer, not someone her kids knew. She called the name Margot had given her, Marissa Chin. The receptionist asked, "What's the nature of your legal concern?" Iris hesitated, then said firmly, clearly, "I need to protect myself from my own children." Iris didn't knock. She just climbed the stairs above the garage and opened the door softly. Deidre was folding laundry carefully, like every crease was a distraction from something she didn't want to face. The scent of detergent and lemon oil hung in the air just the way she liked it. Iris didn't speak right away. She just stood there. Deidre looked up startled, then quickly looked back down at the towel in her hands. Too fast, too practiced. "I need to ask you something," Iris said, voice low. Deidre nodded a little too quickly. "Okay. Do you know what Celeste and Vincent are planning?" Deidre paused, just long enough to answer with silence. Iris took a step closer. "Deidre," her daughter's mouth tightened, "they said you might need help, that you've been forgetting things." "I haven't," Iris said calmly. "I know," Deidre whispered, still folding, still avoiding eye contact. "But they think—" A pause, then softer. "Or maybe they just want to believe." Silence again. "They're planning a family meeting," she said at last. "Soon. Maybe this weekend. They want it to feel casual, but—" She swallowed. "They're going to ask you to sign something. Power of attorney. Just in case." Iris sat down on the edge of the bed. She didn't touch the neatly folded shirts beside her. "Did you agree to it?" she asked. Deidre's hands froze. Then, slowly, painfully, she said, "I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either." Iris studied her face. Same ponytail from college, same habit of shrinking into the background. "I know that habit," she said softly. "I lived it for decades." Deidre finally looked at her. And in that flicker, just for a moment, Iris saw it, fear, but something stronger underneath, something like a crack in the wall. "I don't want to lose them," Deidre whispered. "If I take your side, they'll shut me out." "I'm not asking you to take sides," Iris replied. "I'm asking you to see clearly." They sat in silence for a moment. Then, gently, finally, "I'll be there," Deidre said. "When it happens." And Iris believed her. They called it a family dinner, but it felt more like a setup. The table was set like something out of a magazine. Cloth napkins folded into triangles, wine glasses gleaming under soft pendant lights, candles flickering low, like the whole evening was rehearsed. Iris noticed it immediately. Celeste had never used cloth napkins before. And Vincent didn't even like candles. Something was off. Too clean, too curated, too polite. And Naomi, she wasn't there. "Naomi's at Sophie's for a sleepover," Celeste said casually. "She was so excited, poor thing." Iris didn't reply, because she knew what that meant. Naomi had been removed from the equation. Too young, too honest, too unpredictable. This wasn't dinner. It was a presentation, and she was the audience. Or, maybe, the target. They sat around the table, pouring wine like it was a celebration. Vincent brought takeout from that overpriced bistro downtown, announced it like he'd made it himself. Deidre was there too, quiet as ever, stiff, uncomfortable. She barely touched her food. The clink of forks, the forced small talk. The air was thick with tension, dressed in fake smiles. Iris nodded, responded, played along, but inside she was counting how many minutes until the real show began. And then Celeste put down her fork. Gently. Too gently. She folded her napkin, cleared her throat, and smiled. It was time. Celeste reached into her oversized tote. It was the kind of gesture you'd expect at brunch with friends, pulling out coupons or maybe a birthday card. But this wasn't brunch. This was war, dressed in linen napkins. She placed a manila folder on the table. The flap was already loosened, the corners slightly worn, handled too many times to be casual. "Mom," Celeste said sweetly, "there's something we've been meaning to talk to you about." Iris didn't blink. Didn't move. She just nodded once. "Lately," Celeste continued, "things have felt overwhelming for you. The bills, the house, your schedule, it's just a lot, isn't it? Vincent chimed in, calm and rehearsed. "We've just been thinking it might be time to let us help more. Take some of the pressure off." And then Celeste slid the folder across the table like it was a napkin. "These are just a few simple documents," she said lightly. "Power of attorney stuff. Nothing changes unless you want it to. It's just in case, really." Iris picked up the folder, felt its weight, not heavy in paper, but in implication. She opened it. Words swam in front of her eyes. Durable power of attorney, transfer of authority, financial oversight. Each phrase was sharper than the last. She turned a few pages slowly, then closed it softly. Her hands trembled, just enough to be noticed. She let them. Celeste smiled like she'd just given her mother peace of mind. Vincent poured more water, like they'd just solved a logistical issue. But Iris saw it now, clearer than ever. This wasn't support, it was displacement, a removal wrapped in ribbons. They thought she didn't know. They thought the folder would confuse her, the wording would overwhelm her, and the tone so gentle, so patient, would lull her into compliance. But Iris was ready. Before dinner, while they were plating salad and lighting candles, she had slipped her phone under the folded napkin beside her bread plate, the voice recorder already rolling. The microphone pointed right at the center of the table. "You're not paranoid," Margot had said. "You're prepared." Iris watched them pour wine, pass butter, and talk about easing pressure. Every word went straight into her phone. And her hands, they shook, yes, but not from fear, from performance. "If I tremble," she thought, "they'll think I'm fading. But really, I'm collecting every phrase, every soft-spoken threat, every fake smile pretending to be care." Celeste talked about transition. Vincent mentioned peace of mind. Deidre stayed quiet, but her fork never touched her plate. Iris nodded, smiled, murmured the way they expected her to. But inside, she was steel. Not a victim, a witness. Because sometimes the person being erased is the one recording the evidence. It came on a Wednesday, a knock at the door. Not loud, just official. A man in a blue shirt and neutral expression handed Iris a thick envelope. "You've been served," he said. "Have a good day, ma'am." Then he walked away. Iris stood in the doorway, fingers tightening around the papers. Back inside, she opened the envelope slowly, hands steady but heart racing. Petition for guardianship, filed by Celeste Moore Hart. Reason, progressive cognitive decline. Attached, A letter from Vincent, a summary of concerning behavior, 3 so-called incidents that never happened. 1 claimed Iris forgot to pick up Naomi from school. Another said she left the stove on all night. The last one accused her of repeating stories several times, almost word for word. Lies, all of them, but typed, printed, signed, now official. Iris sat down, rereading the words as if they belonged to someone else. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat there like someone who'd been mugged by her own blood. So this was the plan all along, she thought. Smiles first, then signatures. And now it wasn't just manipulation. It was legal. She didn't come to court in tears. She came in pearls, hair brushed, suit pressed, face calm, but her hands held ammunition. No bullets, just facts. Inside her leather folder, an audio recording from the family dinner, bank statements proving she manages her own finances, a letter from Naomi's teacher praising Iris for school involvement, a signed report from her doctor, cognitive function normal for age. She sat beside her lawyer, eyes clear, lips tight. Celeste's attorney began with flowery concern. "This is about protecting a vulnerable elder, Your Honor." But when Iris's lawyer opened the folder and began sliding evidence across the table, the room changed. The recording played first. "Just have her sign. She won't understand anyway." Celeste's voice, Vincent's laugh, the manipulation on full display. Then came the bank records, every transaction tracked and intentional, no missed payments, no erratic withdrawals. Then the letter from Naomi's teacher, Miss Iris attends every recital, volunteers twice a month, and always brings healthy snacks. Finally, the doctor's report, stamped, signed, undisputable. The courtroom grew still. Celeste shrank in her chair. Vincent looked down at his shoes. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Iris never raised her voice, but with every document, she made one thing clear. I may be old, but I'm not gone. She hadn't planned to speak. Deidre always avoided conflict, hovering in the background, quiet during holidays, absent when things got tense. But today, she stood, not because she was brave, because her silence had become betrayal. "Your Honor," she said, voice trembling, "my mother asked me for help weeks ago, and I said nothing. I was scared. I stayed out of it. But today, I choose what's right." Gasps. Even Celeste's head snapped toward her. But Deidre didn't look at her sister. She looked only at Iris. "Mom remembers everything," she continued. "She's the one who helped my kids when no one else did. She's the one who still wakes up at 5 a.m. to walk Naomi to school. She's not fading. We are." The courtroom grew heavy, not with anger, but with truth. Deidre wasn't perfect, but in that moment, she was honest. And sometimes honesty cuts deeper than accusations. She stepped down, eyes filled with tears. Iris reached for her hand. For the first time in years, they touched. Not mother and daughter in a legal battle, but two women, one who once lost courage, and one who never did. The courtroom was quiet. Not the silence of shock, but the kind that comes after a storm has passed. The judge looked down from the bench. His voice was calm, certain. "Based on the evidence presented, the petition for guardianship is denied." Just like that, no gavel slam, no dramatic music, just truth recognized. Celeste slumped back in her seat. Vincent avoided her eyes. The lawyer quietly gathered her paperwork, defeated. But Iris didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She didn't throw cutting glances or triumphant nods. She just exhaled. A deep, full breath that had been held for far too long. And then she stood. "Your Honor," she said, "I have no anger, just sadness. Sadness that being sane had to be proven." The judge nodded almost apologetically. She turned to her children. "I gave you everything," she said quietly. "But I forgot to teach you the one thing that mattered, how to value what you didn't earn." Celeste didn't respond. She couldn't. And that silence, it wasn't victory, but it was freedom. The house echoed as Iris walked through the hallways. Empty shelves, bare walls, but her heart wasn't hollow. She folded Robert's old cardigan, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar and pipe smoke. She placed it gently into a box labeled Keep. Next was a drawing Naomi made in kindergarten, a crooked house, 3 smiling stick figures, and the words, "Me and Grandma's castle." "Not everything has to be carried," she whispered, "but some things should never be left behind." She didn't cry, not this time. She had cried enough over this house, over dinners gone quiet, over footsteps that grew too loud with entitlement. But now, she packed only what mattered. No china set, no antique mirror. Just the sheet music from Naomi's first piano recital, the mug with a chipped handle that Robert used every morning, a photo of Iris at 40 holding 3 toddlers with fire in her eyes and love in her arms. As the moving truck rumbled outside, Iris looked back one last time. "I don't need this house," she said softly, "to remember what I gave, because what I gave is still mine." And then she locked the door. Not out of grief, but out of choice. The cottage wasn't big. It had 2 bedrooms, 1 tiny kitchen with a creaky floor, and a front porch where sunlight poured like golden syrup each morning. But for Iris, it felt like a palace. There were no footsteps stumping down hallways, no voices yelling about overdue bills, no guilt-tripped requests disguised as just a small favor. There was only quiet, and this time it was the kind of quiet that healed. Every morning, Iris watered her tomato plants. She brewed her coffee slowly, not to stay awake, but to savor. She started reading again, real books with dog-eared pages and no self-help slogans. She relearned how to breathe deeply, not the survival kind of breath, but the freedom kind. And then there was Naomi. Every Saturday, without fail, the little girl would knock on the front door holding a plastic bag of cookies and 2 library books. "Grandma, today I'll read to you," she'd beam. No one forced her to come. There were no drop-off schedules or parental arrangements. It wasn't obligation. It was pure affection. They would sit under the willow tree in the yard, reading, drawing, laughing. Iris didn't say much. She just listened to Naomi's voice, to the wind, to the sound of a heart finally unshackled. She didn't cry when she signed the papers. The new will sat neatly on the desk, 4 pages long, typed in 12-point Times New Roman. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was a line in the sand. Iris addressed 3 envelopes, 1 for each child. Inside, a letter, handwritten. Not bitter, not dramatic, just honest. I am not your backup plan. I am not your guarantee. I am not your safety net. I am a person, a woman, a mother, yes, but also me. She didn't blame them, because blame was just another anchor. And Iris, she was finally learning how to let go. Each letter ended with a line that trembled as she wrote it. "You taught me where I stood in your lives. So I finally stood up in mine." She sealed the envelopes, placed them on the old piano where family pictures used to sit. Then she looked around the room, once filled with demands, now filled with space. That day, she didn't just rewrite her will, she rewrote her story. No longer the woman who gave without limits, no longer the mother who stayed silent. She became someone else. Someone who chose herself for the first time in decades. It was a Sunday afternoon. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floor of Iris's little cottage, warming the air with the smell of lavender and fresh bread. The teapot whistled gently, just loud enough to make Naomi giggle as she tried to pour her own cup. Iris watched her, this 6-year-old girl, with crumbs on her lips and questions in her eyes. "Grandma?" "Yes, love." "You're my favorite person in the whole world." Iris froze, not because she doubted it, but because, for the first time, she believed it. This wasn't said out of habit, not because she baked cookies, not because she paid tuition, not because anyone told Naomi to say it. This time, it was said out of choice, and Iris, she was finally someone worth choosing. She didn't respond right away. She just smiled, tucked a wild strand of Naomi's hair behind her ear, and whispered, "And you, my dear, you are the light I didn't know I still had." The house no longer echoed with demands or false kindness. It echoed with laughter, with tea being poured too full, with piano keys occasionally being banged out of tune. It was imperfect, it was small, but it was hers. And in that golden light of late afternoon, Iris knew, this is what healing sounds like. The garden was quiet. Just the soft rustle of tomato vines brushing against each other, and the faint whistle of wind weaving through the lattice fence. Iris sat on the worn wooden bench she'd painted herself, knees wrapped in a knit shawl, fingertips smelling faintly of soil and rosemary. A small basket of ripe tomatoes rested beside her, each one a reminder that growth takes time, that healing does not shout, it ripens in silence. She tilted her face up to the sun. The light caught her silver hair like a whisper of victory. "For the first time in decades," she murmured, "I get to live without paying for it in silence." This was not revenge, not triumph. It was liberation. They tried to erase her name from paper, tried to frame her mind as faulty. But no one, not even your own children, can erase clarity from a heart that has finally woken up. Naomi's laughter rang out from the kitchen window. Iris smiled. Not because it was over, but because she was no longer gone. Love without boundaries can become expectation. Iris's story reminds us that being dependable doesn't mean we should be disposable. That sometimes the people we protect the most are the first to forget we're human. Kindness without boundaries becomes obligation. Silence for too long becomes consent. Being a mother, a grandmother, a caregiver doesn't mean you have to disappear. You are allowed to draw the line. You are allowed to choose yourself. If you've ever felt taken for granted, if you've ever been the strong one until it broke you, let this story be your reminder. You're not alone. Subscribe to Pieces of Soul for more stories that awaken the silenced and honor the unseen. And if you've ever been an Iris in real life, drop us a comment. We hear you, we believe you.